Thanks, Joaquin and Katie, and welcome to the Inside Sports edition of this Monon Bell special on Channel 19. I'm joined this evening by longtime DePauw head football coach, Coach Nick Mourouzis, and later I'll be joined by DePauw sports journalist Dave Heiss, Scott McGregor, and Rob Dimbo. And welcome to Inside Sports, Coach Nick.
Thank you very much, Dave.
And Coach, it's your 12th season at DePauw. You've coached in 11 previous Bell games, and your record is 6-5. Many of these have been big victories. Some of them have knocked Wabash out of the playoffs a few times. In fact, in your first victory over the Bash in 1981, I believe that victory knocked Wabash out of the top 5 rankings and knocked them down to 10th, knocking them out of a playoff spot, and ushered in what we know as the Coach Nick era in DePauw football. And could you tell us a little bit about that first Bell game and what you remember and how it set the stage for the series over the past 11 years?
Well, I'll tell you, it was really an exciting football game, Dave, my first one, and they told me about all the excitement, and it was really fantastic. We ended up winning the ball game 21-14, but right before the half, I can always remember this, Robbie Doyle was a quarterback, and our receiver was Kevin Perkins, and it was 4th and 4 on the 4-yard line, 4th and goal on the 4-yard line right before half, but we went for a pass, and we threw the alley-oop pass in the end zone, and Kevin Perkins caught it, and we were wondering, that crazy Greek, what's he doing? But that really started, and it was such an exciting game. I'll never forget that as long as I live. It was really a great game. We went on to win the game 21-14 and beat an undefeated team, and Metzlars plays on that team. Metzlars played on that team. He's now playing with the Buffalo Bills. And after the game, when I shook his hand, I mean, he was gigantic. He was 6'7", and I mean, I looked way up at him.
He was a great basketball player,
right.
Too, wasn't he?
And in that ball game, we had young men that were like one kid was 6 foot, 200 pounds, and he was stuffing a guy that was 250-pound tackle, and it was just amazing what the underdog can do in this ball game. And we're hoping that's going to occur on Saturday because they really have an outstanding team. But how they play with their head and heart, and they hustle and hit, and we always talk about the 4 H's, and that certainly proved true in that game. It was an outstanding game. Now,
Coach, just as thrilling as the 81 victory, the 86 loss that you had to be equally disappointing. You were leading most of the game. You were riding the strong performance of a little-known redshirt freshman at that time by the name of Jeff Forrest, had just transferred in from Southwest Missouri. And the Tigers dominated for 3 quarters before they gave up 17 points in the 4th quarter and lost 24-23. But you guys still had a chance to win at the end and couldn't quite get the field goal team on in time for an attempt. But some feel this was perhaps the best game in the entire history of the Monon Bell series. And I was wondering what some of your impressions are. I know it's tough to say a loss was one of the best games.
Right.
But I know that as far as rivalries go, they say that game was one of the hardest fought, had one of the best crowds. And I just wondered, I think it was the last that was actually fully nationally televised, too, on the USA Network, I believe. But
it was an exciting game, David. The end of that was really left us with a bad feeling. And as we marched down the field, we tried to get the ball in closer. We didn't have any timeouts left, and we could have thrown maybe a sideline pass, completed it, stepped out of bounds, but we felt the middle was open. I did. We completed it, moved down in there, and I was convinced that Tom Downham could have kicked the field goal, but we ran out of time. Some individuals were saying, timeout, call a timeout, but we couldn't. It was a 4th down, and we just couldn't get the kickoff in time.
Yeah.
And the field goal, the time ran out on us. And after that ball game, Jeff Bortz, of course, started the last 4 games as a freshman, a redshirt. Really, he didn't play his first year when he went to Division I school. And he came back and did a great job. And we felt so bad. And at the end of the ball game, all I remember saying is, as we looked around and everyone's jumping in joy on the red side, the Wabash side, and I told them just to remember this feeling. And that was our motto going into the next year, remember the feeling, and it certainly proved true because we continue to.
Right. In 87, Coach, you began a 4-year domination of the Bash. And, you know, I think a lot of players, or a lot of people I've talked to contribute that to the bitter loss in 86, was they remembered that. I know the players that were still here, that had been here at that time when I got here in 89, talked about it. And many great players, among them the aforementioned Jeff Forrest, Terry Dickey, Jason Stadler, some big defensive names also, Al Hackbarth. Some of those names were among the teams that dominated the Little Giants during that 4-year period. And What factors do you think played into that streak and allowed the Tigers to dominate during that 4-year time span?
Well, I'll tell you, that feeling went on for several years. In fact, we used motivation at the end of that ball game the next several years. We have a ritual we go through on Friday night before the Monon Bell game, and naturally you try to use all motivational factors motivational things that you can muster up for the game, and that certainly was a number one motivational factor in the next 3 or 4 years. And eventually that wears off because the seniors graduate and you have to start anew. So I guess we have to start anew from last year. And last year was we could have made it 5 in a row, but what happened, we missed just the kicking game. We missed 3 extra points and a field goal. And the kicking game has been very, very important. I think that they have blocked a punt on us the 4 or 5 previous years. And last year we didn't have a blocked punt, but the kicking game almost won the game for us because we blocked some of theirs. But the kicking game has always been a factor. The special teams has always been a factor in that ball game. You talk about the 3 phases: offense, defense, and kicking game. And the kicking game and special teams play a vital role in the outcome of that ball game.
Right. Well, last year, Coach, you talked about the close defeat we had. Do you think that's kind of furthered your ball club's efforts this year and really focused them more towards the game and that they really want to get the bell back?
No question. That is a big motivational factor, David, is the previous year. And they have an outstanding team, and we're gearing everything to returning the bell to DePauw. I mean, that's the number one thing. We're not worrying about anything else. That's the number one thing in the back of our minds, and it's just a big one. I think the key thing is how we lost that ball game at the end, throughout the course of the ball game. I remember the opening drive. I can almost call the plays. We go down, and if I had to do over, remember the 4th and 4?
Yeah, I remember.
I should have gone 4th and 4. On 3rd and 4, on the 4-yard line, we threw a pass, and the young man slipped, or we had a touchdown.
Right.
And I was debating at the time, and everyone says, put points on the board. Well, we kick it, and it hits the upright. We go 0, and we drove for about 70 yards. And if I had to do over, I would go for it on 4th and 4. And I think I would do that anytime, because I think that when we move the ball like that against them, I know our defense has come in there. We've done it in past years. Several years ago, we did the same thing during that streak. We went down in there. I went after a 3rd and 4, a 3rd and goal, 4th and goal, went after it. Turned around 2 plays later, our defense intercepted it. We took it back in and scored. So I think, you have to take advantage of those opportunities. And I think the motivation is there. I think that they have a fantastic football team. I mean, they're averaging, they're going to break their record. They're averaging 450 yards, nearly 450 yards on offense, 208 yards rushing, 230-some passing. And as a team, they're magnificent. Of course, they're undefeated. They're first in all categories on offense and defense. And their defense has only given up 64 yards. But I tell you, our motto this year has been make it happen. And we haven't made it happen. In 2 ball games, we played 2 complete games. We want to make this our 3rd complete game of the year. And we have to find a way to make it happen. And I think our young men, we're outmanned at quite a few positions. But I'm going to say this, that I'm sure that they'll rise to the occasion and perform their maximum ability. And we have to have maximum performance. We have to be at our peak. There's no question. Well,
Coach, we're looking at this week's matchup, and you bring up this powerful Wabash squad, and you talk about their offense. They also have a pretty vaunted defense. They run the 6-1 twisting defense that Michigan State made so popular a few years ago. And we've had some success against it in the last couple of years, especially, I guess it would be 2 years ago up at Wabash when Terry Dickey ran for over 100 yards, and we racked up well over 200 yards in rushing that day. But I just wondered how you're preparing for it this week. And the last few weeks, DePauw's had problems running the ball. And I was wondering how you're planning to attack the 6-1 this year with on offense, especially running the ball.
Well, Dave, we don't want to give up our secrets there, but basically we'd like to have Terry Dickey back and Jason Sadler, but we can't do that. But Ron Herman has been doing an excellent job for us, and our fullbacks have been doing a good job. Jason Bohr, Sean Gardner, and even Mark Malchiori we're using as a blocking back and what have you. They're all 3 pretty good runners. We've had trouble holding on to the football, and that's one of the problems we've had offensively, because we've had big turnovers. You remember the second game of the year, we had 10 turnovers. We made 415 yards. I said if we didn't have those turnovers, we might have made we set a record. Last week we had 7 turnovers, and you can't move the football when that occurs.
Right.
And so, but it's a twisting defense, and it's very difficult. This is a third team that we faced this year, and hopefully we get better with age here. But we played against Albion that used a defense, and Wabash, you can ask for 3 films, any 3 films in the previous, the previous games that you played, and they asked for our Albion film because Albion plays 6-1 Michigan State defense,
right.
6-1 twisting and stunning defense. Rose-Hulman plays it. And so this is the 3rd game of the year for us. And I think we have some things you have to get certain blocking angles. Last year we put in a flip play to get outside, was successful for us. But at the same time, it was something new. We flipped it to Jason Stadler, remember, and he fumbled the ball and
right.
we lost it, and they took it over and drove 7 straight plays into the sideline and beat us. So we do have some blocking adjustments. I think the key thing is blocking adjustments and certain things that you do offensive line-wise that are very important. And I think that we have to take advantage also of their secondary. Key thing is they have 7 seniors back on defense, and they're a real good football team. They've only given up 64 yards on total defense. They're in tops in one of the categories nationally. I don't know their exact ranking, but I know they're first in our conference. Right. And our defense is 2nd against the rush. We're about 70 or 80 yards. So our defense is excellent against the run. And I know strategy-wise, if we want to get into that right now, I know that he has, an outstanding quarterback in Chris Ings. He has an outstanding running back. The one's a freshman, the quarterback's a freshman, the running back's a sophomore.
Kogan had a really good game against us last year.
Right, and he is, in the last few games, he's, out of 15 games he started, he's going over 100 yards in 8 of them. And then last year he had some good yardage against us. So he's going to try and run the football. If he can run the football, eat up the clock and move on us, because he has a gigantic offensive line. A gigantic offensive line. He averaged about 255 in that category. They're moving in a center that they hasn't played all year. He's been injured. So he's 255-pound center. It started in the last couple of years for them. So in this ball game, injuries, just for example, Brian Goodman, I thought he was out, and yet he has a desire to win, and he didn't play a real fine football game last year, and he's determined. The same thing against Hanover. This year against Hanover, he came back and played an excellent football game.
Right.
And so it's great to have, we're going to start with Brian Lansu, but it's great to have Brian Goodman in reserve. So,
right. Exactly. You've got 2 pretty much co-number 1 type quarterbacks. So.
No question. So that's in our favor.
You talk about, I know there's a big rivalry not only between Wabash and DePauw, but I know you and Coach Carlson in Wabash have kind of created a rivalry also in your games, because they've been some very close games in that. And we tried to get some comments from Coach Carlson, but he declined to comment. I just wondered, how the rivalry between the 2 of you has built up over the years.
Well, it's more DePauw versus Wabash versus individuals.
Right.
You try to win the ball games the best you can. I know this, a couple years ago, after our ball game, he was really down and out after we beat them here 2 years ago. And he said he thought of almost getting out of it, okay, in fact, at that time. But it's amazing what he's done in 2 years. And the rivalry is fantastic. I've been with the Open Bucket, and they got a little bucket that's about a foot tall, and they have a lot of peas on there, a lot of more peas than there are eyes. Yeah. But our symbol, our bell, the freshmen haven't seen it, naturally, on our campus, but to be able to ring that bell, it's a 300-pound bell, and when you ring it, it rips your eardrums. It's a fantastic feeling to be around it, and it's probably the best symbol of any rivalry in the country. I can't imagine another, and I haven't heard of any. If they were to line all the symbols of all the rivalries in the country, I would say that would be number 1 in the country. Yeah, if it wouldn't, it'd be a close to number 1. It really is fantastic.
And I think, Coach, you bring up a good point about not only what a great symbol it is, but just the intense rivalry build up between the schools in general, and the fact that over the most years, it has been a hard-fought game, and it's been pretty close. There haven't been many blowouts in the history of the Bell game. I think in your time here, there's only been a couple that were even not that close. But this game is one of the more hard-fought games in the country at any level.
No question. The intensity you can cut with a knife on game day. And the feeling we have before we go out on the football field, I'm literally in tears before we go out. I mean, really in tears. And the intensity and the motivation before that game, if you've never been taped or people have asked to have a tape and what have you, the seniors speak before that ball game. And I'll tell you, it's just fantastic. Yeah. Such a fantastic feeling. The one has to just experience it to feel it. It's just magnificent. Right. And the game is, you'll probably mention this or ask me, the game is 45, 45, and 8. It's exactly split down the middle. And the reason you have so many ties is that if you have possession of the ball, and if you're going to go for 2 to win a game or 1 to kick it and tie, you're going to tie because you keep the ball, you retain possession. So that's why there are so many ties in the ball game. So we have to win. So if we're behind by 1, I'll guarantee you we're going for 2. Okay.
Well, Coach, you talk about the senior speech at the end, before the start of the game, actually, in the locker room, and I've been there for 3 of them before, and that's probably one of the more emotionally trying moments that I've ever seen in any football squad that jacks them up. And I think the DePauw squads, you've done an excellent job of getting these DePauw squads so totally jacked up for the Monon Bell game. I just wondered, how you feel the anticipation's been building this week for the game, and if the squad's been building at levels that you've seen in the past.
Well, it really has. I think the enthusiasm, intensity has been great, and you have to have intensity on the scout teams, the team that emulates the opponent. And we don't have a 250-pound line to show our offensive team. So the young men really have to perform well. Everyone has to perform well this week, and the intensity level is fantastic. Last night, the emotional, you do little extra things during the week. I have Coach Ray and Coach Meyer talk to our squad on what it means to them. The previous games mean nothing, as Coach Meyer said. My previous 11 mean nothing. It's the one right now. This is the 12th one I'm involved in, and it's the most important. I mean, that's the one you're gearing for. Coach Ray talked about him, and he had a fantastic, funny story to tell our squad about Metzlars and a couple of young men that beat Metzlars in 1981, which was a fantastic story in itself. And then Ted Catula talked to our squad this evening, our athletic director. He's been involved in the Monon Bell many years. Mr. Mont, in past years, he had a fantastic record against them. I mean, he retired and he was like 13-4-1 over so many years. And so it really is a great rivalry. And then we have some other things that we do during the week. And the motivation, you hope the motivational pitch is very high come game time. Right. You hope the adrenaline's flowing. The key thing that I always worry about is I never feel you can get too high for a game. You can only get too high for a game if you lose emotional control, where a guy is down and someone will spear him and you get a 15-yard penalty. Well, if it becomes 1st and 25, it's difficult to make that in some cases. Right. Or let's say you give them a first down. You move the stakes rapidly when you have those 15-yard penalties. And it's always a hard-fought game. Maybe in one game out of 12 of 11, or possibly 2, I can remember individuals getting removed from the game for fighting. But it's a type of game where you know that you can't taunt or anything, and you have to walk away. Even though a young man punches you, you have to just point the official and walk away, because if you get in a fisticuffs, if we get in a fist fight, then the officials will eject both. Right, you lose control and you lose access to a player. It can cost you the game. So I really talk a lot about emotional control. You can have fantastic intensity, the enthusiasm's there, but you can't get too emotional that it costs you the ball game.
Coach, one more thing is if there was any more incentive needed for the team this week, 2 things. Number 1, this game will make the difference as to whether the team is 500 for the year or not. If they're above 500 or below 500, sitting at 4-4-1 right now. And I know I can see by the smirk on your face, you know what I'm going to bring up, but you are tied with Coach Gami Neal right now as the all-time winningest coach in DePauw history for 79. And if you're going to get it this season, and I know it's not as important to you, but I think it is important to your players, they need to win this game for you to get that 80th win.
Well, I'm going to make a comment about that. Number 1, we're just gearing and focusing everything for the possession of the ball.
Right.
And all the other stuff will take care of itself. And we're aware of the losing season, but we don't want to harp on that. Our number 1 thing is to return the bell. And, you know, I shudder every time you talk about the Galmi Neal record because it seems to be a thing for the media to keep writing about. And really, you know, my name's attached to the record, David, but really it's not. It's all the players now and all the players previous years and all the coaches. Coach Rayle and Coach Meyer have been with me all. They have, you know, that's their record, really. Right. It's not mine. I mean, my name's attached to it, and I hate to read it all the time that we're two wins away, 1 win away, and I think that's been a factor, you know, psychologically. I think that you got to forget about that. And I tell them the players have to play for themselves and not about other things. The number one thing is to get the bow. If we get the bow, we have a winning season, everything falls in place. But we don't have to worry about the Galmi Neal record. I'm not concerned about that at all. I'm more concerned that if we win the bell and bring the bell back, that's a number one goal, number one objective for this Saturday afternoon.
Well, thanks a lot for being with us, Coach. We wish your team and we wish you all the luck in the world this weekend, and I'm sure all the DePauw fans will be up there supporting you. We're going to send it back to Studio A now and back to Joaquin and Katie.